Welcome to Mind Bending Leadership. My name is Seth Campbell. I'm your host, and my mission is to equip you with real-world tactics to improve your leadership skills, build your wealth, and cause you to leave a multi-generational impact on your world. Today is episode 5. I'm going to reserve the title until we get a little bit later into it. Here's the deal, though. This is a very common and difficult leadership moment. It is perhaps the most common conversation I have when working with leaders and coaching, consulting them, working with people that I work with inside my organizations. And it is quite simply put, how do you address performance issues? And hopefully, like any Mind Bending Leadership episode, you've brought your pen and paper, you're ready to take some notes. You went out and bought yourself a nice Mind Bending Leadership notebook from the dollar store, and you can keep your notes inside of that, whatever. How do you address performance issues? So I want you to write down, because you'll find with all the Mind Bending Leadership episodes, I think I can safely say all of them, they do have application across many channels. In fact, I got a message from somebody saying, hey, I'm really excited about the podcast. I really like what I'm hearing. Although I'm not in leadership, and I'm like, time out. You are in leadership. Everybody's in leadership in some place, some way, at home. If you're a parent, in your church, in your community, leadership is simply look behind you. Are there people watching you that want to learn from you or are supposed to learn from you or are influenced by you? You're a leader. So here's the application. I'll give you a couple of them. Just write this down. Does this have work application? How do you address performance issues? Yes, check. Does it have home life applications? How do you address performance issues? Write down kids. Anybody have kids and parenting? Yes, check. Write down spouse, cross that out. We're not going to deal with performance issues with spouse. So don't go there. I want to say that right up front. There is no such thing as performance issues with a spouse. And if there were, we will not talk about it. So do not do this. This is not applicable, this conversation with your spouse or significant other, no matter how much you would be tempted to go there. Your kids or any minors you're in charge of, fair game. Performance issues. So what brought this up, like I said, this is a very common conversation. I deal with it all the time. And I was in a conversation this week with a great leader that I consult, and it came up again. How to deal with this performance issues. And I have this person, and it wasn't a real serious one, yet it was down the same path. And what I recognize maybe 100% of the time is when we're confronted as a leader with, I've got this other person who's not really performing, hitting numbers, doing what I expect, doing what we thought. It's not working out. Sometimes it's a new hire. Sometimes it's somebody that was doing really well for a long time and has slipped because stuff's going on. It happens. There tends to be this internal dialogue that we deal with as leaders. Some leans toward ignoring the conversation, and we have a rule about running the conversations. Yet there's this internal dialogue, and it tends to be the first stab is, I think it's my fault. And I like that. I agree with that. And I also do coach and consult and train leaders in the ones I work with, my organizations. It's not always your fault, although it is always your fault because everything rises and falls on leadership. You can't use that as a reason to not take action. So let's explore that. It tends to be these 3 channels. I think it's my fault. And that branches into 2 different ones. I didn't really follow up. I didn't double check. I didn't follow through. I didn't hold them accountable, or I didn't train them enough. And then the second branch tends to be, or the second channel it tends to be, is maybe there's some more time. Maybe the deadline was the issue, or they're getting close. They're trending that direction. I probably need to be a little more patient, give them a little bit more time. And then the third alternative, is it the right person or is it the wrong person? So let's deal with that. And let's walk through that progression in Mind Bending Leadership. And I promise you, there's going to be a part here where it really will be a Mind Bending Leadership, as usually is the custom, because this is about real world leadership. And I got to tell you, in all my years, I say it all the time, for some reason, this stuff is not really taught. It's not taught in schools. I've had a number of MBAs that have worked for me, worked with me, say like, they didn't teach this one in class. I learned more in this last conversation, this last 6 months than I did in all those years in school. And it's because real world, you pay attention to other great leaders and you see how to navigate this stuff. So I'm going to throw what might be a curveball to some of you, the mind bend, as we progress through this. So let's start with the first one. The leader thinking, all right, this person's not performing. I think it's my fault. I didn't really follow up, didn't have enough accountability, or didn't offer training. So let's talk about the first one. No follow-up. Is it my fault, Seth? Maybe. It might be your fault. I'm going to ask them a couple of questions to determine if it is their fault. I'm going to say, what's the person's goal? And what I'm listening for there, so you might want to write these down as to take yourself through these questions if you don't have me to talk to or somebody to talk to that would take you through this path. Is it my fault? This person's not performing. Their numbers have slipped or they haven't ever hit the number. Is it my fault? I'm going to ask, what's the goal? Here's exactly what I'm listening for. Is it an opinion or is it clear? An opinion is improve my systems, help us be more efficient. That's an opinion. I think you did it. I don't think you did it. Clear is like a number. 10 is 10, 9 is not 10. 10 is 10, 9 is not 10. 8 is not 10. So what's the goal? I'm listening for crystal clarity. And if the person rambles, well, it's this hodgepodge, I'm going to put myself in the person's shoes and say, okay, that's a lot of opinion. It's a little bit open for interpretation. And it's difficult to do in some roles. I get that because there are qualitative roles out there. Yet as a leader, you must find your way to put measurement on qualitative things. And I think it's possible. I have struggled in some areas, and yet I have witnessed in the real world, you can put measurement on qualitative things. Qualitative things is customer service. Can we measure that? Yeah, we can do a scoring. We can do a net promoter score. And as long as you use a consistent measurement, it's an opinion, yet it becomes a quantitative measure that's consistent of a qualitative things. So I'm looking for clarity. Is it an opinion or is it clear? 10 is 10, 9 is not 10. The next thing I'm listening for inside of what's the goal, is it moving or is it stable? And what I mean by that, man, I see it so often. Leaders set these moving targets. And I used to be guilty of that years ago. Hopefully I'm not as much anymore. And what I mean by the moving target, because many of us, as we're in charge of these organizations, we're a little ADD, we're all over the place. And we like solve one thing, we move to the next and the next, and we're thinking 5 moves at once. And it becomes this moving target. Like today, this week, it's all about fixing these numbers or fixing this, putting out this fire. And I'm grading you on how well you do that. And then next week, it's all about this other thing. And I'm grading you on how you do that. And somehow I blend it together in my mind that your performance is lacking. And yet this person, I essentially am creating a moving target. Sometimes it's the same goal. It's this certain number. It's a recruiting number or it's a sales number. And yet I keep changing, I keep cranking the dial up on them, which is not abnormal. Yet if I'm doing that right before they're hitting or as they're hitting without them co-authoring that with me, I might be moving into a moving target land. And go back to sports. What if we were all playing football, basketball, anything? What if it's football and during the game, they kept changing how you score points? At some point, it can be very frustrating. It certainly is not going to build skill. It's going to build flexibility. It's going to build your resistance to frustration. Yet at some point, you might be winning and then losing. And we got to be careful of the moving targets. Now, the industries shift. When we shift with industries, we do that with thought and with strategy, not with impulse and ADD. So I'm listening. What's the goal? Is the opinion clear? Is it moving or stable? And then the final kind of piece of what's the goal I'm listening for when they answer me, when I'm coaching this leader, or you're asking yourself internally, is it spoken or ignored? And what I mean by that, did we put the goal up on the chart at the beginning of the year or the end of last year, and we never talked about it again? Like literally we've talked about everything but that. And now, I'm looking at the clock and I realize, wow, this person's doing terrible on that one thing. And yet I've had 100 hours of conversation with them and never brought it up once. That's a problem. That's a problem because you essentially made the goal something else. You're back to the moving thing. And it was whatever you were talking about during the 100 hours. When that's the issue, I'm like, yeah, it's your fault. Hopefully you don't, have a trigger on the word fault. Go into repair on that. And the repair on that one's easy. It's clarity. Restate, re-agree, re-clarify, set a new timeline, go. Now, the other branch on my fault, sometimes leaders say, I followed up and I did this, but I don't think I gave them great training. I think I could have been a little more hands-on. I could have been a little bit more over their shoulder. I could have been around. I could have trained them better, that kind of thing. I'm going to push back on that one a little bit. And if you listen to, I think it was episode 4, where I got into resourcefulness, the legacy, and I'm obsessed with people having their own resourcefulness. I'm going to say to the leader, in this world, if they were clear on what they needed to achieve, and we're in the YouTube world, or we're in the Udemy world, or we're in the internet world, they don't lack resources. They lack resourcefulness. They should be able to find the answer. And some leaders struggle with that. And it could be a little hero syndrome. And I'm just going to remind them, if you're the prophet and the expert of all things in your organization, you are the ceiling. You don't want that. There's no way for you to be the expert at every category of your business. What you do want is teach them how to go out, and maybe you connect them with other resources. Yet I'm going to push back on that one and say, did you ever set an expectation for them to go get their own training? No, I didn't really do that. Okay, naturally you would. And if I stopped and I asked you right now, you're a high achiever, who trained you? How much training did you get on your job? It's amazing how many high achievers I'm talking to who are trying to tell me that they don't think they train their person. And I say, who trained you? And they crush it. This is a big producer, big whatever, big money maker. And oh man, I had to learn that on my own. I had school of hard knocks. I'm like, exactly. That's who you want. And that's the real world. Yes, we have an obligation to develop people. Yes, we have an obligation to train people. More than that, we have an obligation to remind people that they're in a world that has plenty of answers. And our job as a steward of a leadership is to just help them find those resources and make sure those resources align with our ultimate goal. In other words, I wouldn't want them learning a model that has nothing to do with this. That's going to be a waste of time. Or learning from something that's not proven, because that's going to waste their time. Or I might be okay with it if there's enough time on the clock, because let them fail a little bit, stumble, and then come back and say, hey, is there a better way to do this? Do you know a better model? Sure. Glad you asked. So that's how I'm going to move out of my fault. Either get clarity, give clarity. Training, I don't think so. I think it's remind them of resourcefulness. Now let's talk about the second channel. I think they just need more time. I think they just need more time. That's the performance issue. I'm going to say possible, depending on the last conversation. Now, with more time cannot be more time as is. In other words, I'm going to say, I agree, maybe this individual needs more time. However, it comes with an asterisk. More time after you add more clarity. After you clarified that the number's 10, it's not better or more efficient. You went from opinion to clear. After you set the expectation of them getting training, coming back, reporting back. After that training is added. So one of the other ingredients must be added. And then I'm going to go further than that. And I'm going to say, as a leader, I want you to think about this almost like the old days of probation or PIP, performance improvement plan. Think in those terms. Okay, we're going to add some time to the clock with this new ingredient of clarity and training, or you getting training, or I'm providing training, whatever it may be. And we're going to agree that if the number's 10, you're going to be at 6 by this date, 8 by this date, 10 by this date. And I'm going to set some milestones short term along that path, because what I'm trying to figure out in that situation is I've got to get this person to this ultimate place of performance. And the ultimate place of performance is I know exactly what number I need to hit. I know where to get the training, and I'm choosing not to do it. I know what needs to be done, and I'm fighting the internal battle of not doing it. Now, I know that rings to all of us because we've all been there. We all have the procrastination moment. We've all let ourselves down. Yeah, I know I should stick to the diet, and I keep eating the cookies. All right, that's me talking to myself. We all have that. So don't wear that heavily. However, I would bet the farm that if you're successful, you've overcome that enough to win. where there are some people that are still stuck in that. And as much as we love them and want to help them, we may not be able to help them through getting up and taking action. Those go into the realm of, I call, their parents should have taught them that one. As much as I would love to help them with take action, do what I'm supposed to do, I don't expect anybody to do that 100%. I don't do it 100%. I do expect it more than zero. I'm going to probably release that person back to the world. So that's ultimately where we're getting to. So clear, they're deciding not to do it. So only more time on the clock if clarity and training is added, short-term goals and milestones become the other ingredient, think probation. Now let's go to the last channel. Do I have the wrong person? It's like the one we want to avoid half the time. Do I have the wrong person? And it is noble, by the way, as a leader to say, blame yourself first. I agree. Everything rises and falls on leadership. You should go through that progression. Here's the mind bend. Do I have the wrong person? And I've given you, every once in a while, I'll give you what I call mind bending leadership pillar. This is an MBL pillar. So write this one down. No wrong people, only wrong roles. There are no wrong people, only wrong roles. We should put that on a t-shirt. No wrong people, only wrong roles. That's a mind bending leadership pillar. And that's the conversation I eventually led to. And as a leader, I want you to get into that mind space. There are no wrong people, only wrong roles for those people. I fundamentally believe God put every single person on this earth and gifted them with enough talents to go and fulfill those gifts into the world in certain ways, in certain mechanisms, certain industries. I think there's flexibility in that. And yet there is a place, there is a role, there is an excellence for all human beings. I fundamentally believe that. So when I'm to this point of, oh yeah, it's clear this isn't going to work in performance, I take on, this is the right person, I got the wrong role. Now, I even do that in hiring. So if I'm interviewing somebody and we get to the end, I'll be like, you're the right person. I have the wrong job for you. So you don't want this. You're going to hate it. You're going to be miserable. Everything that we've talked about is clear. You want freedom, autonomy, this, that. I'd planned on locking you in a closet and sticking you in a desk in the dark and meet no other people. And you want like freedom, autonomy, and a whole bunch of social surroundings. So you're going to hate this. Isn't, are you good enough? Or do you have the skills? You're going to hate this. You're the right person, not the wrong job. Now, I still believe that when we're in a performance issue, this is not about the person, this is about the job. And I've got the right person, wrong job, which is whose fault? My fault. So that's why everything does rise and fall in leadership. We lie to ourselves when we try to stick to the first one. Oh, it's my fault. I didn't follow up. I didn't have enough accountability. Maybe I need more training. And it's the wrong role. And all the clarity and accountability and follow-up and training and you over their shoulder in the world is not going to make it better. And I shared with this person I was coaching a very real powerful moment in my leadership journey that I've shared with some folks before. And it goes back to, I was the owner of this business, and this is the person I have in charge of the business, in charge of growing it. And it was through recruiting, adding people. And this individual actually was number one in the world, like literally had won an award as number one in the world, going on almost 24 months now in a very large organization that succeeded at that. So literally number one in the world at that job is working for me in this role. And I would meet with this leadership team on this business every single Monday, and we go through their numbers. And the truth be told, I got lax. So it was my fault. I got lax on digging into the pipeline of leads and sales and who's coming up and where's everybody at. I used to do that every week. And this individual was so good. We had gotten to the, I got it. And I'm good with that. I don't love holding people accountable. I'm good with that. Earn that space. So here we are. And it was, I remember October 21st, like 2018. And and the goal for this individual was no less than 10 people added to this organization every single month, and never missed that. not 1 month ever had missed that. The end of week 1, there's only one person added. Oh, that's a little bit of a warning sign. He's like, don't worry, dude, I got it. Cool. He's earned that. I trust, I believe. End of week 2, only one person. I'm like, all right, this is a concern. Like, I'm officially like nervous. Man, I'm the guy that I got it. Okay, cool. And he believed that. It wasn't lying. He really believed that. End of week 3, one person still. Now at this point, I'm not in the meeting. I'm actually on the phone. I'm in an airport getting ready to go teach somewhere. And I'm on a conference call, which is probably not the best way to have a high stakes conversation with an entire leadership team of the people that work for him. So you may not want to copy that part of this conversation. Yet I'm like, time out. And the individual's like, okay, now I'm worried. I don't know that we're going to hit 10. And I said, one sentence. Are you sure this is the right role for you? And you could feel the tension in the air. The silence was deafening because the whole team is listening. I'm on a phone. I would not have loved that situation, yet it was what it was. Are you sure the right person for the role? Are you sure this is still the right role for you? And there was this weird silence, like I said, and then a pushback. I think it's the right role for me. I'm literally number 1 in the world. Yeah, I think it is the right role for me. And I said, are you sure? Because the role requires 10, and you're saying that you don't think you're going to get 10. So I don't know. Is this still the right role for you? Are you sure about that? And it was awkward. And where the conversation went was the title of our Mind Bending Leadership episode number 5. You and I are good. You and the role are not good. You and I are good. You and the role are not good. I love you. I love you like a brother. We're in this together. That's cool. You and I are 100%, more than 100% good. You and that role have a problem. And that's where we want to get to as leadership. That comes from a place of love. You can hear that as, ooh, Seth is a hard ass on numbers. No, let me tell you why. It is because if you go back, and I think I shared in episode 2, our journey, it's the very first thing I start with any organization that I have either ownership in or that brings me in to consult or coach. Let's identify your mission and vision very clearly. Like, why are you even exist? Why are you doing this? What's it all about? And we had that clearly defined. The very next thing is like, okay, let's quantify some goals. How will we know that we're trending that way, making that impact? We've got to put measurement. If our goal is transforming lives, what mechanism do we do that in? We do it by adding people, increasing their success. Okay, let's set goals. How many people? How much increased success? We've got to measure our effectiveness towards this mission. Then the very next step is you create roles that exist for those goals. I covered this in episode 2. And the big 3 to 5 big rocks of every role must add up to hitting that. So when the number is not 10, the role requires 10. Why? Otherwise, we're not transforming lives. We're letting down the generations. I said 1 month is okay. Okay, where's the line? Is 1 month okay to miss? 2 months okay to miss? Is one life not being transformed? Are you okay with that? What if that's the one that makes a generational impact? And if we have the capacity to do it, we've already proven that. If it's a number nobody's ever hit, we've never done before, yeah, maybe I'll question that. Maybe we'll change it. But when we've done it all the time, we've never missed, never come close to missing, then we're probably applying our minutes to something else. And when I say yes to that, then I've allowed that role to not be about that. And I now have allowed the mission to not be what it really is. So back to it. You and I are good. I love you. You and the role are not good. Are you sure this is still the right role for you? And he finished with 11. Never had that worry again. And as I've shared that before with his permission publicly, and one time, once or twice, he was in the room when I shared it in a class, and people were like, oh man, you must have hated him. Tell us. And I didn't know what he was going to say. He can say anything once. He's, listen, tell you the truth, I was pissed. I was offended. I was mad. That was my first reaction. And then I knew Seth cared. He wasn't saying, it wasn't about the numbers to him. It was about the lives. And at that moment, I got more respect for Seth than I ever had in my entire life, because I realized this mission really does mean something to him. And I'm bought into this mission as a leader, and he's standing for the mission. And that's kind of leader I want to follow. So as a leader, many times the reason why we avoid that conversation of performance is because we are making it about the person being wrong. It's uncomfortable. We're going to be mean. What are they going to think of me? What am I going to think of them? And if we can get to this separation, you and I are good, you and that role are not good. Now, I love you enough to help you be better at that, or help you find the role that is better for you. That's being a good steward of leadership. And think about the importance of this. I'll give you two analogies. One is military, I think, is a brilliant thing to study when you're talking about team building and how people work together. If we're in a unit of 6 people and your job is this and my job is that, what happens if I don't do my job? Your life is on the line. You should yell at me. You should call me out. I shouldn't have that role, because people could die. You could die. This is not life and death usually. However, it's the concept. The roles matter. Your performance of that role has consequences beyond, we missed that number. Oh, you missed that, enemy that came up the rear and we lost 2 people. Numbers have consequences. The other way I like to look at this that might help you is think about and I'm weird where I study these analogies. I speak in analogies. It's weird, I know. Think about the judicial system. Think about a judge. And if you're in the courtroom and you have committed a crime, the judge isn't taking that personally. The judge can still love you. It'd be like, hey, you didn't violate anything that bothers me, maybe. You violated the law. The law says you can't do that. You and I are cool. You and the law have a problem. And the law prestates that this is what happens when you violate that, and you can keep moving. So it's like that. You and I are good. Yeah. And I even said it to him, like, I'm okay with less than 10. Seth is. The role's not. The mission's not. And my role as the owner is to make sure that happens. And I don't want to have a problem with my role. So you and I are good. I love you. You have negative 10. I still love you. You're the role, not in love. What are you going to do? So that becomes this place where we can put ourselves in this acceptance of another mind-bending leadership pillar. Leadership is stewardship. Leadership is stewardship. It's not ownership. It's not ego. It's stewardship. Stewardship is, I've been placed in charge of this land, these people, these children, this money. I've been placed in stewardship of it. Take care of it, cultivate it, make it more prosperous, make it fruitful. Leadership is stewardship. You have an obligation to be a wise steward. And that means loving people enough to help them into their destiny. And when you do that, and you do that fiercely, that's how you shift generations. And that's what mind-bending leadership is all about. Get yourself to a place when people are clear on their roles. We help them, we steward them, we coach them, we consult them. And when they are the right person in the wrong role, we go right at that. And we either help them get back on track with their role, or we help them find the role that is better for them. And that might be outside our world, outside our organization. And that's perfectly okay. That's called being a wise steward. So in that case, he was the right person for that role, for that season, got back on track, and forever looked at the business and the driving of a mission very differently. And remember, driving the mission, that's how you make a generational impact. So with that, I will let you go build your leadership. Thanks for listening. All right, let's go. I got a little fired up. I'm going to let y'all unmute yourselves and put your videos on. Should you choose? I was so fired up. I left a little section out that I'll save for a future episode. All right. Questions, comments, ahas, gut punches, thoughts, disagreements?
It was awesome.
All right. Thank you. Talk to me. What is your internal voice saying that y'all don't want to share?
What if it's someone you don't love and you're like, you and I are not okay, and you're not okay with this position?
That's a awesome question. It's a deep answer, in my opinion. I think if it's somebody you don't love, that is, in my world, that's 100% about you. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no judgment on that. And I would just say, if I'm in that situation, I still might exit that person and exit that relationship. That's totally fine. What I would be careful about is moving on without addressing the why I don't love that person, with no judgment. Because, and the reason I say that is because I would think that is something that could come back to get you in a way later with another person. I actually have this weird belief, and my wife and I were having this conversation yesterday morning, actually, that when we have those stressors like that, like I'm irritated, it could be on the lowest level. Man, I keep getting frustrated, this one reoccurring thing, all the way up to I don't love this person, I have a real issue. I actually think that is you call it what you want, God, universe, whatever you believe. I think that is something inside of you being pinged that wants to be let go, that wants to be released, that wants to, it's you getting a chance to level up through letting something go, which is weird. Like whatever you're frustrated about over and over again, I believe is you getting a growth opportunity to let go. And it's what if the universe came and knocked on the door and said, are you ready to let this go? And that we receive that as, man, I'm pissed off, or I don't like this. And then we push it down and it's like, okay, I'll be back. So I would just take that shot too, just to make sure, unrelated to maybe the performance issue, if that makes sense. Is that helpful?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great question. What else? What does your internal voice say when you hear all this today? I love it when people share their internal voice.
I also think that it's tough to approach a situation like that because it's hard to control how people respond, and that the walls can be put up immediately and they can be tough walls to break through, and it could end relationships before you could potentially get to the crux of the issue of like, it's you and the role, not you and me. And the relationship is always, in my opinion, more important than the role for that person and the person. So how does one approach a situation like that and minimize the potential defensiveness that could be expected?
And this is why I say, please say what's your inside voice saying, because I promise you what you just said is what 9 out of 10 people are thinking, because that's what if I was one-on-one with somebody, that's literally what the leader would say back then. How do I, what you just said. And here's why I approach it. So let's talk through that. When you say, I believe the relationship is more important, agree. Why is that? Why do you say that? Like for you, just give me more texture on that.
I think it's because of my personal experience that people I work with, in general, I work with them because I like them, and I've accepted working with them as part of me liking them. And so the relationship has often come first and or simultaneously. And usually if it's simultaneous and I find out I don't like that person, I basically avoid working with them.
Yeah.
So that's
and that's no, what about so if we dug deeper on like the importance around relationship, and I agree with that, what does that mean to you? What makes a relationship good? What makes it important? What are your best relationships?
Honest relationships with each other, mutual respect and admiration and love and friendship and comfort.
Perfect. So think about somebody that you've got so think about somebody with a great relationship, that you have that honesty, you have that mutual respect. Can you go back to the first time you ended up having a huge burst of respect for that person? And it's something I'm just going back to memory. Think about somebody where you're like, whoa, like that's when I had a lot of respect for that person. Like one-on-one, what was that conversation like? And sometimes hard to pin down.
It's almost like an implicit understanding of one another rather than a particular moment of, oh, here's the moment that the respect
and sometimes that's it. It's a series of small ones, and they've triggered something internally that you've labeled as respectful.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, I think if you really went back and thought through it, what you'll find is we tend to respect the person that we received almost a challenging message from them, as long as we knew that it was coming from a place of care and concern. So the best relationships tend to be with that level of honesty.
Yeah.
If I said, man, tell me about your best friends, you'd be like, man, they'll call me out on my BS. Like they're the one. Everybody else is even. And for some people, we put out like this wall, this instant, don't mess with me, I'm scary. And there'll be somebody, man, they're not scared of that. They'll tell me how it is. Like they'll slap me. They'll tell me and those are the people that we tend to have the best relationships with. And so here's the weird, crazy part. The mind F, so to speak, is if I'm getting there with you and I say, I don't know, I'm uncomfortable having this conversation with her. What if she gets offended? She doesn't like it, this and that. And I have not yet taken that challenge yet. I haven't actually attempted to be honest with you yet. So it's all in my head, right? It hasn't happened. You haven't ran out the door, told me off. Then really what I'm dealing with is something inside of me.
It's true.
And if I really trace that down, it's my own discomfort. And here's the dagger. Is I care about my comfort more than I love you. It's actually rooted, this is going to sting for some people. It's rooted in selfishness, cleverly wrapped in this blanket of, man, I care about that person. I don't want to hurt their feelings. If you love them, then avoiding that is you caring about your discomfort more than you care about them hearing what they need to hear. What if we had doctors that were like that? I don't want to tell this person if they
got cancer.
I don't want to tell this person they keep smoking, they're going to die, man. I don't want to hurt their feelings. They're going to cry. I don't want to tell them they have cancer. Like they got to stop. Like, I don't want to hurt their feelings. No, like I got to love this person enough to look them in the eyes and say, I'm sorry, but if you keep this up, you're going to die. Somebody's got to tell you that. It's the intervention. It's that, right? If you keep, that person is the one who loves purely because it's very different. It's not the person you're an idiot, you're stupid, you got to stop doing that. That's not conveyed with love. That's also another form of selfish. And if you're scared enough because you don't have enough relationship capital, I promise you, if you padded it up front, your chances of success are better. Like it would be like this. I want to have a conversation with you. And can I be honest with you? I'm scared to tell you what I want to tell you because I'm worried that you're going to be so upset that you're not going to want to be friends with me. And this relationship, I care so much. I'm actually tempted to avoid saying this to you because I don't want to lose you as a friend. Now, if I pre-framed it that way, what are you going to do? You're probably going to relax. Your defenses will probably go down. And then I'm going to say, listen, I could be way off. You 100% disagree with me. I care about this relationship. I don't want to lose you as a friend, but I love you enough that if the roles are reversed, like I would want you to say this to me. Like I said, I could be way off. Here's my observation. When you say X or you do Y, I think this is probably impacting you that way, or I feel this way, and that's on me, yet I just want to throw that out there. So there's ways to soften that. And I think when you approach it from that, which is what I did in that conversation, I was very clear. I love you. You and I are good. Like, we'll be good no matter what. So hopefully that's helpful.
That's very helpful.
And most likely that person, even if I've done that before and they're like, you're way off, you're stupid, da, da, da. And I was like, dang it. And then, I don't know, a couple of days later, they came back. I thought about it. You're right. Nobody ever told me that. Oh my gosh. Then I started seeing it all over. So I did it to 5 other people. How come nobody ever told me? I can't tell you how many times I've done it professionally. I remember doing an interview once, which is real scary. It was like over the phone, first time phone interview. And I just felt the team from, I would call the Holy Spirit, like God, saying, you need to tell this person that they're talking like a victim and that's why they're not getting a job. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't even know this person. And I did it. I said, you're the right person. I got the wrong job. You're not going to like it. Can I tell you more about that? And this is going to be weird. I'm scared to say this. I just have a feeling. I don't know you. You're probably going to think I'm a weirdo, crazy person. But I just feel like I have to tell you this. You're using this language. You keep blaming that last boss. You keep in you told me the last 3 jobs and it was always everybody else's fault. That's going to portray you as a victim. That's going to make people scared to hire you, not take ownership. So, oh my gosh, like I've been through 50 interviews. Nobody told me that. You're 100%. I have been a victim. I have been acting that way. I don't even know this person. And she was like, start crying. She's like, thank you so much. Like for caring enough to say that, like you're a stranger. I was like, okay, you're welcome. And I guess I'm not crazy for today, but yeah, it does get easier the more you do it. And for some people, they're wired a little bit easier to do that. Like the Enneagram Challenger, Chris Benson is on here. I see he's a Enneagram Challenger 8, and it comes a little bit more natural for them. But yeah. Anyway. Thank you for that. I hope that was helpful for other people, that dialogue.
Thank you. Thank you, Seth.
You're welcome. Go have that conversation. Somebody here is listening. Yes, go have that conversation with that person. You know you need to.
Seth, this is Chris. I was reminded, and I don't have video on today, but I was reminded just as a leader to be willing to be wrong, or to be willing to accept that my perspective is just my perspective. And as much as I think something is a fact, it still could be wrong. And because there can be a certain ego in, I said it and I'm sticking to it, or I don't even consider that, oh, like now I got new information, I heard another perspective. And just in that conversation, I think it's just not to be, sometimes we think as leaders, I think that we want to say, hey, is it me? Is it me? Is it me? But also there's some validity in, hey, let me analyze where I'm coming from, how I created that story or this kind of this conclusion, and then be willing to look at that data again and then just validate that, or say, hey, redirect, like, okay, new information. That's interesting. Okay, let's redirect and have another conversation and adjust. Let's pivot.
Yeah, said. Thank you. All right.
Which is, I guess that's the ultimate, when I come from care, that's what we do.
Yeah.
We say, hey, I'm willing to not have to make this about me or my perspective or what I thought was right, but I am willing to say, we got to go somewhere. We got to have a define the relationship moment, because we may need to pivot. And that may not be my solution. It may be yours, but now that we're talking about this, let's co-create something.
Exactly. Like it's not about, it's as weird as it is, it's not about us. And the most powerful relationships, and this is like getting into like even high level, like marriage, spousal relationships, is if you can get to a point of you and I are good, the problem is right here in front of us. It's this, so it's like the third object. So, honey, you and I are good. My issue is with this over here. And by the way, this over here can be her words to me or my words to her. And to be able to frame that as I love you, I have a problem with those words or this action or this thing. But that's really high level because we're pretty trained that when I have a problem with your words or your actions, I'm talking about you. And at the highest level, it's even biblical. Love the sinner, hate the sin. And I'm not saying it's sin, but it could just, but it's the framework of that. You and I are 1000% good, will always be good. That's unconditional love. My issue is with this over here can be your actions. And man, it's tough. It's tough to hear that. And I could be wrong about that. I could be off, or that's my perspective, or I've misheard it, whatever. Practice your next confrontation. I know I said don't do anything with your spouse. Practice your next confrontation, trying to separate them from their action or their words, and then own the fact that you're offended by that. What they did or said, you've got no judgment towards them on. You're offended enough that you want to throw it out there. And if they don't care, that's a whole different thing. But they don't have to, or they disagree.
Seth, what's the role of, I think of the role of expectations, or what's the role of expectations in that conversation? So I may say to my wife, hey, I expected something. And then I may be unreasonable in that, or I have a boss relationship or a employee relationship, and I'm unreasonable in that expectation, but I think, okay, this is what I expected, and I'm ticked off, even though that may be unreasonable, or it may be totally reasonable. How do you navigate that?
That's a deeper one. There's a sentence I'll give you. When you did X, I feel Y. When you did X, I feel Y. That's the shortcut. When you pick one, when you did whatever, I felt, here's the deal. Let's do a spousal one. Let's do a real one. I was going to do like a love attempt. I won't go too far. I'll be like affection. When I invited you to come sit with me to watch a movie, and so here's the situation. Hey honey, come watch this program. I don't want to, I'm too busy, and I'm like offended. I'm angry. Anger is always the second emotion. The first emotion is a vulnerable one, and it's going to be rejection. Most high achievers that go straight to anger have programmed themselves to completely ignore the very first vulnerable one, because we were taught as children that we weren't allowed to feel those ones. So if I've mastered when you did X, I feel Y, here's how that would go. Honey, can I frame it out? Can I talk to you? I'm a little nervous about this conversation, that whole thing. When you said no about watching the show with me, I felt rejected. Now, and before there's a reaction, I'm going to say, that doesn't mean you rejected me. I want to share with you how I felt that. So now I'm presenting the third object. And the third object is actually not her saying no to watch the show. The third object is my feelings of rejection at the highest level. And because you're my wife, my most trusted person, I want to share with you like this weird thing inside me that felt rejected. I don't know where it came from. I don't know. It wasn't about that. I don't think you rejected me. Did you? No. Okay. So I'm not blaming you. I'm like serving up. Like I need help. I need help with this feeling of rejection. I'm not saying you better watch shows with me because maybe she was too busy. Maybe it was an unreasonable request. I'm serving up my pain, because if I don't serve it up to her, I'm going to find an outlet for it somewhere else. or it'll build up and it's going to be an unhealthy outlet. I felt rejected. And that's not your fault. It's not your feeling. I don't think it was your intention. Help me with that. And help me isn't save me, come call. I'm not pulling you in the victim triangle. Don't do that. Be my consultant, be my coach. It's permission to coach, is not fix. Help me talk through this. These are my childhoods, this weird stuff. And maybe she ends up saying, wow, next time you ask me, I'm gonna know, or at least I'll know it well enough to say, hey, like, I'm feeling vulnerable. I'm not just asking for come watch this show with me. I'm feeling lonely. And maybe there's another way for me to receive that affection without it having to be interfering with her trying to do what she's doing. Maybe I can go hang out with her. However, if I would have skipped all that nanosecond and went straight to anger, I'm either going to take that out on her, or depending on how our past fights have gone, I'm going to bury that and it's going to come out in another way. I know we just went real into it right there.
I think of the kind of on the side of the person with the need, even to understand. I'm asking you to come watch TV and then to learn, oh, what I'm actually feeling now is I've got a need.
Yes.
And then just communicate that way.
Yeah. So
actually, I'm feeling a need here, and I'm not asking you to fix it, but I just want you to know I feel lonely. I feel whatever. Right?
Yeah. And loneliness is not her thing to fix. That's codependency. However, she's your partner. So you share that with her. And by the way, 9 times out of 10, sharing it takes away its power. It takes away its power. And it's weird how much like that actually makes it go away anyway. And if you find the source of it, then you can release that. There's 2 triggers. I have these shortcuts. I plant like little bombs in my head that go off like tripwires. And there's 2 of them. Anger. And when I go to anger, frustration, my tripwires, second one, what was the vulnerable one? Loneliness, insecurity, rejection, abandonment. It's gonna be one of those for me. Not good enough. And before I catch myself too deep into anger, I'm gonna go back and find that. And my job is to say it out loud, as embarrassing as it may be, or as tough as it may be. The second tripwire is complaint. You said need. Every complaint is an unstated need, a need. So every time you hear yourself complaining, say, what was the request that I didn't put out? You don't spend enough time with me. Okay. As a complaint, what was the request? Honey, I'm feeling lonely. I would love to find a way to have more time together. It's not, I have to fix it. I'm just throwing it out there. Every complaint is a request. What was the request? Now, sometimes if she complains, I'll be like, she knows this. We have that rule. What was the request? That's a complaint. Just be careful with your time on that one. I didn't tell you. But yeah. All right. That's enough today. We've gone into marriage counseling now. Love you all. Have an awesome week. Thank you.